Hi. My name is Roz Crews, and I welcome you to the Williams College Museum of Art. I'm the Associate Curator of Programs here and co-curator of this exhibition, which is called Color Theory by Pallavi Sen. Nick?
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. My name is Nick. I am a first-year PhD student at Yale in art history, but I graduated from the MA program at Williams this past spring. I was also a Mellon Curatorial Fellow here at WCMA.
And we're so happy you're here. We're going to talk for about 35 minutes and walk you through a variety of works in the show and talk about some of the thinking behind the work. We will also have ample time for questions. So after we're done, we're going to open it up for you to have lots of questions and answers. But before we even start talking, one of the most important things about the show is that you have up-close and personal experiences with the work. So we're going to invite you to spend the next 2 to 3 minutes looking around the space. Really, you can get up quite close to the work. Just be careful not to touch it. And look at little details, big details. We want you to find something that you can connect to in your personal life. So join us in walking around. Okay, take another 30 seconds. Make sure you find something you're connecting with personally. It seems like some of us have found our thing that we're connecting to. By thing, I mean attribute of a work of art. And I want you to just hang on to that for a moment. And I'll give you a little information about what you're looking at before we dive deeper. You're standing in a solo exhibition by Pallavi Sen, who is an artist that was born in New Delhi and lived in Delhi and Bombay from 1989 when she was born until 2007 when she moved to the States to attend the Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. And she's been here since then when she started undergrad. She's currently a professor of multiples and distributed art here at Williams College and studied at Virginia Commonwealth University in the extended sculpture program. So she's a printmaker, she's a sculpture maker, she's a drawer, painter, really does a lot of different things. She also is an excellent chef and has at times incorporated cooking into her practice as an artist, incredible gardener, and identifies as a farmer. And so she's thinking about ecology beyond plants and animals, and really exploring human ecology as well. Yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about her. Nick, do you want to add anything?
I guess I'll draw attention also to that she's a textile maker and quilter, and I think that's evident in a lot of the work here, both in actual textiles and also represented ones. And these are all sort of modes of making that are really important to her pedagogy as well, which we'll get into.
Thanks. So I asked you to find something you connected with, and that's connected conceptually to her work and the way she's thinking about pedagogy and experience in art making and sharing that with her students. So we wanted to make it an opportunity for someone to share what they noticed and what they connected to and talk to us a little bit about it. Do we have any volunteers to take us to the work? Yeah, Hugo is going to bring you a microphone. And you can guide us. Tell us your name and guide us to the work.
Sure.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Oh. Here we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
My name is Peony, and the work that really spoke to me is straight ahead from me.
This one?
Yep. And what spoke to me is
Come closer.
It reminded me of a warm embrace. And family, and sort of when you reunite with a family member you haven't seen in a while, and that hug that you experience. So for me, it really kind of spoke to me, and it felt very comforting looking at that work.
Peony, thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share a little bit about what you noticed? Let's see. One more volunteer. Yeah. Tell us your name, please.
Hi, my name is Steve Smith, and I like this one in particular because I love books, and she also has my favorite poet, W.H. Auden, there. And I also like the way she painted the bookcase as though it's sort of a frame within a frame. And you have the picture frame, and then another frame, and another frame, and then the bookcase itself. Even though it has wood grain, it's also sort of abstract. So it's kind of like multiple frames framing the books in the center of the painting. So I like the way she conceptualized the structure of the painting.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so grateful for both you and Peony's observations. And you both hit on two of the kind of containers that we'll be talking about today. One is the notion of family and home life, and two, the idea of pedagogy and thinking about the classroom. And additionally, we're also going to talk about studio. So in some ways, this show represents the confluence of one's studio, one's home life, and one's classroom. Pallavi has created a kind of world for us to enter. It's an externalization of the people, places, things that influence her, and by allowing us to enter it, we have the opportunity to kind of look outward and see what she sees, and then also think about what does this show teach us or tell us about the artist.
So I'll pick off where Roz left off and talk about sort of one of those spaces first, which is the classroom and pedagogy, and I want to sort of ground that in one of the works, which is this small one right here next to the folding screen. And if you haven't had a chance to come look at it closely, please do.
Yeah, come as close as you can. I think this is a quite small work with lots of incredible details, and it is showcasing one of her talents, which is a deep, close looking with watercolor painting as the medium.
Yeah, thank you. This is one of my personal favorites in the exhibition. And I want to talk about it in relation to to teaching, but also the title of the exhibition, Color Theory. And so Pallavi, and I think around 2019, was thinking about teaching a class with the same title, Color Theory, here at Williams, and was thinking about sort of how to organize the structure of the semester, and in lieu of creating a sort of traditional syllabus, painted this, and really sort of helped her think about color theory and what she wanted to get out of that class. And for her, color theory is a way of sort of teaching her students to be really sort of precise and to take time and precision with sort of mixing colors and seeing what sort of comes from that, and also to experiment a lot. And one of her reasons why she likes color theory so much is that personally, and I'm sure many of us here, sort of learn the basics of, red and blue make purple, etc., at a young age in school or through books. And those are sort of very rudimentary or basic formula for, how to make new colors, but they also have sort of infinite combinations and possibilities. And so one of the things that she wants to impart both in her work and in her teaching in the classroom is to think about how to sort of start with something very basic, like sort of mixing of two colors, and how that can sort of explode into unlimited possibilities, and also how that can, that sort of patience in experimenting and doing over and over again can also not only be applied to art, but also one's everyday life in sort of other areas. And I think that sort of overlapping between art making and practice and living is something that is really prevalent in this space as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to expand on the idea of classroom and talk a little bit about how the exhibition has been used as a classroom since it opened in September. Obviously, we're situated in a college, and Pallavi is a professor here. And so she has a deep commitment to educating future generations, but also the public. And so she wanted to use this space as a kind of performance site, a place that could be activated by both students and community members and other artists. So at a certain point in making the exhibition, there was a decision to add this table that we're sitting around, and not to just have a static table that is a sculpture, but to have an actual table that's meant for working and doing projects at and thinking together around. So we've done a variety of programs with students, with the clubs on campus, and also classrooms and faculty coming to use this space as a site for discussion. And we've also had student makers leading workshops and activities for students, sometimes regular weekly activities, other times more one-off opportunities. For example, one of our student clubs is ARC. It's a alternative artist newspaper magazine that students run as a collaborative, and it's really important to them that they are learning from each other and coming up with ideas together. And so they use the space for their meetings, but they also hosted Pallavi and I for a conversation that was really intimate and small group of students asking us about our processes. And I think that is one of the ways the show has served as a platform for these conversations. We also hosted the Urban Bushwomen, which is a female African-American dance troupe that's been working in the United States and beyond for 40 years. And they're really rethinking their practices from doing community-based performance in site-specific and context-specific places, but also stage work in traditional theaters, and thinking now, how do we move into museum spaces and galleries? And so I thought it could be a perfect opportunity for them to collaborate with an artist within Pallavi's show. So we brought Urban Bushwomen here, and they worked with the dance department and students on campus and Pallavi. And so they hadn't met Pallavi before, tour. They came, they learned about her work ahead of time, and immediately formed a really fascinating partnership, and Pallavi ended up performing in their dance sharing that they did in the space, and it was a beautiful kind of use of the exhibition. And I'll say that all of that is important because an alternative title for the show is Activity Room, and that title comes from a class that Pallavi took as a child where she was basically invited into a classroom as a kid and just given all kinds of activities to do. And she wanted to create something that felt similar to that and the kind of freedom that exists in pedagogy that looks like that. Another piece of this is Pallavi's collaborated with lots of her students over time and sees that kind of experiential learning as part of her pedagogical practice. So I want to point you over to this piece. This is a textile work that Pallavi commissioned by her former student, Young Cho, who was one of her first students at Williams about 6 or 7 years ago. And this is a replication of another piece in the show. Has anyone seen it when you were looking around? Yeah, over there. So this is 35th birthday, and this is Young Cho's version of it in embroidery. So Pallavi likes to talk about, she taught Young how to embroider, but nothing like this. So Young took this sort of minimal embroidery skills that she learned from Pallavi in her class and is now a, professional artist working in the media of embroidery, textile making. Nick? We're going to head over to the original 35th birthday.
Yes, and as I'm walking over there, I'll just sort of add on to a little bit of what Roz was saying. I think, so to the left of the doorway here with the clock, there is a blackboard with activity room on it, and so I think that title still lives in the exhibition, and it also was is a functioning calendar of all the programming in this space, and that was something that Pallavi knew that she wanted sort of very early on in the process of thinking about the exhibition, and sort of even before we knew sort of what would be in the room, she knew that she wanted it to be a space that was used and sort of lived in as much as a sort of studio and classroom and domestic space can be lived in an art gallery. And so like this table is used, and she was interested in just more than sort of evoking the idea of a table that would be used or could be used, but one that is actually sort of gathered around and sat at by people who come in here. So this is 35th birthday, and I think I'll just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on in the work. It's an incredible watercolor, like the color theory syllabus. And so Pallavi is in the center here, looking through a sort of paper sieve at the moon that's out the window. And you can actually see that same sieve over there in the work.
In the work that Peony pointed to with
Yes,
the people in Embrace.
So the same sieve is there as well as the moon. And so she's in the middle here on this carpet, which is both a sort of domestic interior space as well as a space of making, and so a sort of representation of what this space here is meant to, the larger space is meant to be. And sleeping on another carpet is her future child, and the person who we can't see is, their face is a future lover. And let's see, the cat is here looking at two angels, which are her grandparents, and she says that the cats can see them because they can see spirits. And let's see, her parents are in here as well. And, sorry, yes, thank you.
Mother, father, sister, and brother-in-law, future baby, future lover.
And you can also see other references that are to works in this room. And so the bird painting right behind her is up there in the corner. And there are also, there's Middlemarch, a copy of Middlemarch, which she's been reading on and off for a year now. And so there's this sort of sense of things and people that have been around her daily life that make it into this work. And her father's also reading a newspaper that has the headline Freedom at Midnight, which is thinking about, or is directly referencing the independence of India from the British Empire and also the partition of India and Pakistan. And so she's thinking about sort of this historical moment, but she's also replaced the flag on the cover with the Palestinian flag, and so is thinking about the possibilities of statehood, both sort of in historical moments and contemporary and sort of into futurity. And so with the presence of people and ideas that are sort of in multiple temporalities, she's sort of really expanding, I think, the possibilities of what this space were, are, and could be.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything else about the way, I mean, I can say, if we're thinking about this as a representation of home, there are many examples of friends and family members spread throughout the room. And I think of them as her interlocutors, the people who are helping her navigate the world. And by making art that represents them, there's a kind of meditation on the love and the relationship that exists in those partnerships. In this drawing, which, you know, we haven't given you titles for most of the work because she really doesn't want for you to have a mediated experience in that way. But this is called Me and Little Me. This is a portrait of her that she made this year, really thinking back to her time as a child and imagining, you know, all of the ways she's grown and all of the dreams she had and where she's landed with those. Do you want to add anything about home and family?
Sure. I think that, yeah, so this space is something that we had an artist conversation with Pallavi last night, and something we talked about was the sort of vulnerability, I suppose, of opening up this space, which is a sort of reflection of the past 7 years of her life, different sort of snapshots of work that she's made, about half in the last year and half that it's in the past 7 years. And her family have really sort of been around for that, and she talked really beautifully about the ways in which she makes work for her family members and how they sort of, the sort of reciprocal exchange between and relationships that she has with her family are present here, and also really define the work that she makes as well.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned in the beginning that this is a classroom, it is a home, and it is a studio. One thing to know about her is many of these works were not made in a studio the way you might think a studio looks, where it has like table, art supplies, space to put your work on the wall. She's actually making these works at her kitchen table, or on her balcony at her parents' house in India, or in front of a lake at Skowhegan, where she serves as the dean. And so I think it's important to recognize the kind of expanded approach to studio practice that Pallavi takes. And again, that's a really inspirational kind of modality for our students, because they get to understand, you know, you don't have to have an expensive studio space with expensive materials to function as a practicing artist. And I think it's a good lesson for all of us to take away with, is that you can really make art out of your own life and make it anywhere at any time. Anything else you want to add about the idea of studio?
Yeah, I think the site of the studio and also the site of the bedroom are places that are represented really well in the history of art, and particularly when artists are painting themselves or representing themselves in something like self-portraiture. And because studios are places where they're able to represent themselves as artists, as makers, and also the bedroom as a place that is sort of intimate and sort of a reflection of maybe who they sort of really are inside. And I think it's really great that there are many sort of self-representations of Pallavi in this space where she has painted or drawn herself, but that you can really also see sort of snapshots of her through the different works that sort of clue you into who she is, but don't sort of really give you a complete image of her, and so that you can sort of piece together. I think there's like her character really comes across sort of if you look sort of throughout the room.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, there's lots of things left unsaid and lots of questions unanswered. So I think we're going to transition into a Q&A with you all, and you can ask us about specific works that you have questions about. You could ask more broadly about her practice. You could ask how things are made, any kinds of questions. We're open to it. So Hugo is going to bring you a microphone so that the question gets recorded in the video of the tour. But let's see, anyone have a question? Yeah. And when you ask your question, will you tell us your name, please?
Hi, my name is Jamie, and I'm a grandmother, and our grandson's here. And when I walked into this room, I was really struck by the color. But as I walked around, it was this that really sang to me.
This one?
Yeah, it's about water, obviously. It's about the times we spend with family and water, the community, and sort of the generational history that many of us have with water-based experiences, which was big in our family. And in fact, it was so different than everything else, I almost wasn't sure it was the same artist. And so my question is, from a curator, the decisions made, I'm very curious about specifically including this, and I'm glad that you did.
Wow, thank you. I can tell you a little bit more about this piece. I briefly mentioned it, but as we were in the process of making this show, Pallavi was trying to understand the kind of shift in her own practice from making a work like 35th Birthday or Color Theory, which require extreme precision, a trained hand that might come from practicing mixing colors over many, many years, and the kind of physical pain that doing a project like that can have on somebody's body, where you think about this is probably at least dozens and dozens of hours kind of hunched over with a tiny brush. So she, over this summer, while she was working at Skowhegan, she was looking for ways to break out of that mode because she knew she needed to make quite a lot of work for the show and wasn't sure how she was going to be able to do that kind of work in a sustainable way in the amount of time that she had. So she started experimenting, and she started working with colored pencils, which she hadn't done in the past, as well as loosening her hand with watercolor. So this is a painting of people enjoying themselves at Skowhegan after work. So if you're not familiar, this is a very prestigious residency in the art world, and many kind of the artists you might have heard of or seen at a museum like MoMA, they went there and they studied there. And so you have a collective of, I think, 60 artists that are sort of staying there all summer long and learning from each other and practicing very intensely. And it's both like extremely work-focused and an opportunity for pleasure and community, which is something she looks for in her life and in her work. So these are people after, after work in the afternoon, just kind of lazing around. And to me, when we were thinking about what would be in the show, it felt really important to include something where we could talk about the way an artist's practice changes according to sustainability, circumstances of one's life, all of those things. Yeah.
I also think that sort of thinking during the installation process, there's a lot more work that Pallavi has that didn't make it into the exhibition, and for example, there's a clock above the doorway, but there were dozens of them, and this marbled paper that she marbled herself. Also, there were several sheets. And I think, but this is one of the works that we knew when thinking about the sort of rhythm of the space in the room that we didn't want to let go of. And I think, adding on to what Roz was saying, like this work with the books is so sort of, there's so many details in it and sort of separate things to pay attention to that I think the work that really struck us also, in that it's like, right, it's so different, and a sort of unique sort of surface of the water that's represented there that is really stands out. And we want it to sort of rhyme, I guess, visually also with the shells here, and the ways in which the sort of lines are moving in that piece as well. And so, yeah, we thought this was originally somewhere else, but yeah, I'm really happy that there's a sort of moment here.
And all three of these works were made this summer while she was at Skowhegan. So the shells are actually, if you've been to the Bates Museum, they have drawers that you can pull out. Bates College is very close to Skowhegan. And you pull out these drawers, and there's like all different shells of a certain area in Maine. And I think that indicates the kind of exploration that she opens herself up to. And the bookshelf is the bookshelf that she had at Skowhegan, and these are books that she's not necessarily read, but they serve as inspiration and aspirational kind of thinking around what's possible in one's intellectual pursuits. Yeah. Oh, can you wait for Hugo to bring the mic, just for the recording? Thank you.
Christopher. And the borders here remind me of the way some Indian miniatures are mounted, often with several different colorful borders.
Thank you, Christopher. Any other questions? Yeah.
You're mentioning about the studio and how this place will work as a classroom, but also a studio. I see the activity room board here. So students actually work in here, and how does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have an excellent Associate Curator of Community and Campus Engagement who we've been working with to organize alongside our student program assistants. Shout out to Yaldana and Hugo, who have been working with us all semester, learning about the ins and outs of making programs. But those students, along with Rachel, have been scheduling time with student groups and with individual students. Some of them are our interns, and others are outside of WCMA pre-existing relationships. So one example is every Friday from 11 to 12, Jess who's our communications intern, she leads a kind of open studio workshop making at the table. And students are crocheting, they're doing collages, they're talking about the work, they're thinking together about the future projects they might do. So that's just one example. Yeah. Other questions? Well, I think we also wanted to mention part of this exhibition making process included making a publication, and that publication finally got printed, and we have copies of it downstairs. Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about the work, the publication as a work in the show?
Sure, yeah. The publication meant a lot for Pallavi, and I think for us to sort of think about the ways in which the book might do something different from the exhibition and not just be a sort of perfect mirror of what's happening here. And there's a lot more work represented in there. And Roz and I and one of Pallavi's longtime friends and critics have essays in there. And we were thinking about the publication as a way to sort of extend the life of the show beyond its limited run through December in this space, and as a way to both have a record of Pallavi's work things that are here and things that she's also made since graduate school, but also as a way for future audiences to engage with her work and who maybe wouldn't be able to make it to this space.
Yeah, so those are available downstairs, and also they're editions. So there's only 200 copies, and they're signed and have a edition number. One part of the show that we haven't talked about yet is a video series called Attraction Foundation, and I wonder, Nick, do you want to say some words about that project?
Sure. Yeah. So there, in the room over there, which we won't go into right now, but I invite everyone to check it out, is a loop of videos that Pallavi has been making for the past 10 years or so, which she started making on Instagram as a way just to sort of experiment and to think of ways of art making that centered her body, and also that sort of, didn't have to take place necessarily in a studio space. And I know that she also made a lot during lockdown in 2020 during the pandemic. And they're really creative and funny and exciting sort of little experiments that she has either sort of centered her body and performs, or thinks about things that, just picks up her phone and records things that she finds, flowers that look like certain shapes along the road. And so I think it's a sort of perfect encapsulation of the sort of like possibilities of art making that can really sort of expand out of what we might sort of consider proper or traditional in a space like the classroom or the studio.
Yeah, and so I'll just add that we hope you leave feeling inspired to think about your own home, classroom, studio as places that, you have a lot of freedom and possibility to experiment with new ways of working and thinking. I think that's all we have, but I want to invite you to come back to Williams College Museum of Art in the next couple months. We're going to be doing a few programs. One in particular is an opportunity to talk with our director and other members of the building project committee really directly about our new building. So if you're from the area or if you came to town, you must have drove by the circle that's out on this main road, and there's a big empty lot there, and that's where the future home of our museum is going to be. It's our first purpose-built building, and we're moving in sometime in late 2027. So come back, talk to us about the project, and check our website for future programming, and thank you for being here.